Planning a winter getaway to a sunny destination could likely cost you a lot more than in pre-pandemic days. The added expense of PCR tests, along with other rising travel-related fees, are driving up the costs. Earlier today, the head of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce called on the government to make travel more affordable. The CBC's Natasha Fatah is working on this story for us, as she has been all morning. So let's talk about this. What is the Chamber of Commerce asking for, Natasha?
Well, let's talk about those PCR tests, John. Those are required by the Canadian government for anyone who is entering into Canada. So the problem with this is that there's no universal principles being applied across continents, countries, even sometimes within countries. There are different rules depending on where you are. But for Canada, if you want to enter the country, even if you're a citizen, you've gone abroad, coming back, you need to get a PCR test. So that can run anywhere from $100 to $350, and it can become incredibly prohibitive for families. There's also the issue of tests that are required by some countries and not by others. So, for example, Canadians often travel to Mexico or the Dominican Republic during the winter months, and those two countries do not require Canadian citizens to get a test in order to enter. But other countries, namely Jamaica, Turks and Caicos, and perhaps most importantly, the United States, will require air travelers to get a test. Now, you can just get an antigen test, which costs about $50. But it's coming back home where the costs are adding up. And so what we heard from the president and CEO of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce is that other countries in Europe have recognized that this doesn't make sense and that there is a repetition to the testing that is not required, particularly if someone is fully vaccinated, and if they prove to be a negative test on the cheaper test, why bring in the PCR testing? So they're calling on the federal government to reevaluate this. Now, this isn't the first call that's been made to the Liberal government, and they have said that they're reviewing their policy on this matter. But at this stage, John, if you want to go to the United States to see loved ones or even just get a break during the winter holidays or even for the weekend, when you come back home, you're going to have to pay at least $100, maybe as much as $400 per person to get back into Canada.
Let's talk about this, Natasha, in terms of another issue brought up during the news conference. Now, this is particularly an area that I guess if you didn't have kids, you wouldn't think about it. But in terms of their ability to travel and their ability to come back into this country, what was said about that?
So the issue there, John, is because, as we all know, there is no vaccine that's been approved for children who are 12 and under. And yet travel restrictions for those children who would presumably be traveling with their vaccinated parents still exist. So when they come back, it's not good enough that they have a negative COVID-19 test. They have to quarantine for 14 days. And what that means for families, particularly working families, is, are you going to have to set up virtual learning as well? Are they going to be missing classes? Do you have to stay home and take care of your children? Do you have to get childcare services? All of this comes with an expense. And so all of that is adding up. So, John, there's that, and there's also the skyrocketing prices of airfare, the hotels, car rentals, even travelers insurance, because while all those prices had dropped during the pandemic, during its initial few months, they've all boomed back up because these companies need to make their money back, and there's a high demand. And the issue there, of course, is who's putting in that demand? Well, seemingly, increasingly in Canada, it's going to be the wealthier who are going to be traveling, and those who are working class or middle class might opt to just continue staying at home as they have been doing for almost 2 years now.
Thanks for this, Natasha. CBC's Natasha Fatah, live in Toronto.